Okay, so I told you that I would do this a while ago, but the first three sections I felt were not that tricky. We're going to actually go through the tricky ones. I think starting with the fourth chapter here. So I'm going to take ahead and going to go ahead and look at implied main idea. So you go to reading skills, learning path. We're going to go to implied main idea. Obviously, you might want to review some of the stuff there, but let's look at the recall one. I'm going to go through this in two other sections. Okay, the topic of a paragraph is both broad enough to include all the material but restrictive enough to reflect the most significant details and the same as the subject matter. And that is actually, let's see, I think the best option here. Yes, it is. All right, good. All right. To formulate the implied main idea of a paragraph and the implied central point of a passage, ask the question here. So the questions we could ask are: what is the author's attitude toward the topic? That's a part of it, right? Who or what is the paragraph about? Okay, that's also a part of it. Why did the author write this? That's probably the least important question to ask when you're doing this for the main idea. But probably the most important thing is, what is the author saying about the topic? So let's check that. All right, great. Okay. To find the topic of a paragraph, ask the question, which statement best conveys the author's point? Why did the author write this? Who or what is the paragraph about? Now, we are talking about the topic of a paragraph and the very definition of that topic. What is this paragraph about? So it's going to be who or what is the paragraph about? Modern technology is amazing. The suspense, building up there. So this also, okay, excellent. Explains why for my English classes sometimes it takes forever to grade physically like this through the computer, just because it's so slow, and then you have to wait. Okay, to find the implied main idea of a paragraph, you start by determining the topic, put the author's main idea in your own words, pay attention to the supporting details and examples that are given, or all of the answers. I'm going to go with all of them this time. I think that's all pretty good idea. Okay, great. To formulate the implied central point of a passage, see how the main ideas of each paragraph contribute to the overall central idea. Look for the statement that states the author's main point. Now, this is implied, right? So it's not going to be stated. So probably already, right? You can't look for a specific statement. You could ask what the passage is about, but who isn't really an appropriate question. So this first one, how do the main ideas contribute to the overall central idea, would help you find an implied one. That means it's not directly stated. And this is actually, as I said, where it can get just a little bit tricky. So we're going to go through two of the first exercises here, practice 1 and practice 2. So if you already did this, right, I'll still give you the 100% on these, but I still want you to do it, right? So if you show any kind of score on these ones, I'll still give you the 100, even if you already finished this, okay? So let's go ahead and go through it here. Okay, so we're looking for implied main ideas. First question, what's the central point of the passage? I'm just going to kind of skim through it very quickly. Is bottled water safer than tap water? That comparison is probably important, right? Bottled water has become increasingly popular during the past 20 years. Many people prefer the taste of bottled water to that of tap water. I also feel bottled water is safer. Is this true? The water we drink in the U.S. generally comes from two sources: surface water, groundwater. Surface water comes from lakes, rivers, and reservoirs. Many of the cities across the U.S. obtain their water from surface water. Groundwater comes from spaces between underground rock formations called aquifers. People who live in rural areas generally pump groundwater from a well as their water source. So that's saying basically that they're the same source almost. The EPA sets and monitors the standards for a municipal water system. EPA does not monitor water from private wells, but it publishes recommendations for well owners to help them maintain safe water supply. Local water regulatory agencies must provide an annual report on specific water contaminants to all households. In contrast, the FDA regulates bottled water. It does not require that bottled water meet higher quality standards than public water. That's probably a very important issue thing right there. As with tap water, bottled water is taken from either surface water or groundwater sources, often treated and filtered differently, which changes its taste and appearance. Though bottled water may taste better, there's no evidence that it's safer to drink. That's also probably a main idea. Look closely at the label of your favorite bottled water. If the label states from a public water source, this comes directly from the tap. Some types of bottled water may contain more minerals than tap water, but there are no other additional nutritional benefits of drinking bottled water. All right, central point. 2 government agencies. That's a minor point between the 2 paragraphs. Bottled water tastes better than tap water. That's a very minor point, right? Bottled water is more popular, also very minor. So we're going to go with this last one. There's not much difference, if any, between bottled and tap water. And that seems to be the main thrust of all of that. The sources, the nutritional value, things like that. Okay, great. All right. What is the topic of this passage? I'm going to say it's a comparison between bottled water and tap water. So that gives us the bottled water versus tap water option, since the others aren't really about they're details, right? And there are 2 water sources, but it doesn't make a big deal of that. Okay. What is the implied main idea in paragraph 3? The EPA sets and monitors the standards for municipal water system. Okay. EPA publishes recommendations for well owners. The EPA does not monitor well water. Local water regulators have provided a report. The EPA has a system in place. So of all of those, I'm going to say that the EPA has a system in place to make sure our water is safe, right? It publishes recommendations. It does certain things even if it doesn't directly oversee that. Okay, good. Okay, in paragraph 4, we've got to go to paragraph 4. The implied main idea. The FDA regulates bottled water, but it doesn't require that it meets higher quality standards. So this is implied. There are no regulations that make bottled water safer to drink. Bottled water is filtered differently. It says that outright. Bottled water has a different taste. It says that. Bottled water is taken from public water sources. It says all of that. So the implied main idea is that there are no regulations that make it safer. Okay. What question should you ask to find the topic of paragraph 4? Okay, so the question there, EPA sets and monitors. Okay, so if it doesn't require that it meets a higher quality standard, right, then how is it tested? Okay, that should probably be the question you're asking. Like, why bother to test it if it doesn't meet a higher standard? How is it actually tested there? Yep. Okay, support for my mother. This is the second passage here. So we're a quarter of the way done. In the spring of 1991, my mother fell as she walked down the steps. She'd broken her hip many years before, walked with an uneven gait. When she lost her balance, she feared she'd broken her hip again. The ambulance took her to the hospital for x-rays. Hairline fracture in her hip. She couldn't walk well enough to be on her own, so the hospital discharged her. I lived about 2,000 miles away, so I came to visit. My sister and I knew that she could only stay in the nursing home for a short time under Medicare. The cost would start to mount. We created a discharge plan that would allow my mother to move into her own apartment. To carry out this plan, we had to find the health care and social support she needed to live on her own. I had to get back to work and my family. Okay, so that second one was all about what she tried to do to take care of her mother and the many challenges there. So what is the implied central point of this passage? Nursing homes are very expensive. That's a detail. It's difficult to care for your parents if you live far away. That's also, it's only in one sentence. Difficult to find health care and social supports for the elderly. Caring for an aging patient has many challenges. All right, so let's look back here. I think it's mostly about support for my mother. So caring for an aging parent has many challenges. Let's see. Yes. So the title helped us out there a little. What is the topic of the first paragraph? Author's mother injured herself when she fell. I believe that that is probably as blatantly stated, right? Because it doesn't really matter that she fell down the stairs. It doesn't tell you if she got hurt. Now, her having to go to a nursing home is important, but that is also a detail. So let's go with the author's mother injured herself. That is the main idea there. Okay, the topic of the second paragraph. Nursing home care is very high, which is a small detail. The challenges of setting up a care plan for an elderly patient. That seems to be a pretty big one. Living far away while caring for an elderly patient, that was a small part. Health care and social supports. Let's go with the challenges of setting up a care plan for an elderly parent. Okay, good. Okay, in the first paragraph is the sentence beginning, she couldn't walk, the main idea of the paragraph, detail of the paragraph, topic of the paragraph, or central point. Okay. She couldn't walk well enough to be on her own at her apartment. I'm going to say that this is a detail of the paragraph. Okay, great. Okay, we're going to do one more of these. As I said, these are starting to get a little bit trickier. Like the supporting detail one, the next couple ones I think are harder even than this one. But you kind of have to split hairs a little bit and determine, is it a supporting detail or is it the main idea of the paragraph? And so you need to make a couple different assessments there. So let's go ahead and do one more together. Okay, viscosity. When you pour yourself a glass of milk, you're making use of a familiar physical property of liquids. Because particles in a liquid are free to move around one another, a liquid can flow from place to place. Physical property of liquids called viscosity is the resistance of a liquid to flowing. Because liquids differ in viscosity, some liquids flow more easily than others. The greater the viscosity, the slower it flows. Molasses is a thick, sticky liquid with high viscosity. Molasses flows slowly. The lower the viscosity, the more easily. Okay, so water, rubbing alcohol, vinegar, thin, runny liquids, all right? That was examples. Why do different liquids have different viscosities? It lies in the movement of the particles that make up each type of liquid. Some there's a greater degree of friction, and these liquids have higher viscosity. At the extreme high temperatures and pressures inside Earth, mantle rock sometimes melts to form magma. Surprisingly, the properties of magma can vary. So all of a sudden it switched to magma, right? For example, not all types of magma have the same viscosity. It depends upon its silica content and temperature. Magma is a complex mixture. Its major ingredient is silica. Compound silica is made of particles, the elements oxygen, silicon. Silica is one of the most abundant materials in its crust. Silica comes from magma. Okay, so that's all random stuff about magma. And then we got amount of silica in magma helps determine its viscosity. Then we're going to get way more about lava here and magma. So I'm just going to skim past this. How does temperature affect viscosity? Viscosity increases as temperature decreases. On a hot day, honey pours easily. If you put the honey in the refrigerator, its viscosity increases. Cold honey flows very slowly. This is how viscosity changes. And then we go back to magma and lava. And so the hotter the magma is, the lower its viscosity and the more rapidly it flows. All right, which is why really hot volcanic explosions are dangerous, right? Okay, so which sentence is the topic of this passage first mentioned? So let's go back. The topic was viscosity. So we're looking for that word. When you pour yourself a glass of milk, you're making use. Nope, not the first one. Because particles in liquid are free to move around one another, a liquid can float. No. Physical property of liquids called viscosity. There it is, right? That's where it is in sentence 3. Okay, good. The last sentence in paragraph 2. Water, rubbing alcohol, vinegar, thin, runny liquids. These are supporting details that further illustrate what viscosity is. Which sentence best states the main idea of paragraph 5? Magma is a complex mixture, but its major ingredient is silica. The compound silica is made up of particles, the elements oxygen and silicon. Silica is one of the most. So it's all about silica. So I'm going to say sentence 1, since that seems to be its major ingredient is silica. Okay, great. What is the best title for this selection? It's all about viscosity. It doesn't talk too much about the flow of liquid. Silica in nature is a small thing. Magma is a small thing. I'm going to go with viscosity in nature because it's talking about natural elements. Okay, great. Okay, we're 3/4 of the way done. Plants and animals. Plants associated with more stable environments may produce fewer and larger seeds with a larger store of energy than the seedling can use to become established. Such plants may invest a considerable amount of energy in toxins or heavy seed coats to reduce predation. Some plants adjust their production of seeds to meet current environmental conditions. Then an example here. Okay, so that's going to be an example of it there if that comes up. In other species, the adjustment may involve plastic response. Okay, let's go to the second paragraph. Animals make similar adjustments. Annual species, such as insects, pass through winter months in the egg stage, produce an enormous number of small eggs. Birds such as quail, mammals such as rabbits and mice, which are subject to heavy predation, produce large numbers of young. So this is about basically how animals and plants will overproduce in harsh conditions. So which of the following? Both plants and animals adjust seed and egg production to meet environmental conditions. I am going to say this is the central point, right? that they adjust it. Now, if it were just seed and egg production, it would be a topic. But since it says they adjust it to meet environmental conditions, that's going to make it a central point. Okay, great. Okay, which the following insects that overwinter in the egg stage produce an enormous number of eggs. That is an example. Now we need to look to see whether it's example 1 or example 2. That's example 2 because it's given in the second paragraph. Okay, great. In moist environments, speedwell produces few but heavy seeds. So that's going to be example 1. Plant and seed production. I talked about this in the previous one. I think that's the topic, right? Plant and seed production there is the topic, but it's not the central point because the central point has a more pointed thing about how they actually go about doing that. Okay, we are done there. Let's see. We got 100. All right, so that was practice 1 and practice 2 there. I think I'm going to be doing this for supporting details as well because that can be extremely tricky. So thank you very much, and I will talk to you in class soon.